call. That's why they call me Mr. Positive. That's why they call. That's why they call me Mr. Positive. And even if the world goes crazy, I will always stay the same. That's why they call. That's why they call me Mr. Positive.
Stop. Hello and welcome to another SDA Q&A. My special guest today, Kelly Nelson. How are you, Kelly?
I am doing good, especially when people are watching.
Oh yes, we've got people watching. We've got people watching on Twitter,
I,
and I think we're on Instagram as well. Facebook, YouTube, we're everywhere.
I get asked that question at the grocery store, and I give them that answer. How are you doing? I'm doing good, especially when people are watching.
Yeah, it confirms you're still alive. I look, it's great to have everyone here watching today, and so those of you that were watching my Matthew Lucio video interview last week, remember that we were going to try and have a part 2 today, and he's away, and it just wasn't working, so he is going to be on next week, same time next week, part 2, and on the day before, which is LA time, Tuesday, 5:30 p.m. We've got Mr. Thunder himself is going to be interviewed. Kelly, I'm not sure if you've seen my previous interview with Thunder Lauriston, but he's the second most watched interview of all the interviews I've done of all the 300 plus interviews. So he's on next week. But today we've got the very well-known Kelly Nelson. And Kelly has only watched 3 episodes of SDA Q&A, but interestingly, Kelly, you were watching the interview with Matthew Lucio, and we were talking about Bob Brinsmead, and that must have pricked your ears up because you wrote to me and said, hey, I was involved with the Awakening movement. And I thought, I tell you what, if Matthew can't make it, let's try and have you chatting with us about that experience, because I know a lot of people are very interested in all things Bob Brinsmead. He certainly has led quite a diverse life, hasn't he? Quite a rich life, going from the Awakening to more liberal progressive, to working for city council, to possibly agnostic, possibly now very interested in the Jesus movement. What happened after Jesus died? So I've interviewed him twice. You've watched one of those interviews. So you've seen the Matthew interview, the Bob Brinsmead one. What's the third one you saw?
Jim Wagner yesterday.
Oh, yes, that's right. I'm just going to quickly bring up a couple of comments, and then we're going to chat about you, your life, and how you got involved with the Awakening movement, which in many ways, off air, we were chatting, and you said you're kind of still all on board with it. So I can't wait to unpack that as well. So before we get into that, though, we've got Fred Simmons. Is it Simmons or Simons? Let me know, Fred. I hate to be pronouncing it incorrectly. Peter, I'd like to see a discussion sometime on synagogues versus temple, relating to how most of the apostles and Jesus work was in the synagogues. Yeah, that's a good one. Fred, maybe you can come on and we can chat about that. Moto Sapiens here on time, and glad you're here. Not late. And I started reasonably close to on time. And Faye, good to have you here watching, also from Barbados. She's excited to watch the EJ Thunder interview next week. It's sure going to be a fascinating interview. Out of interest, those watching, can you just write in the comments, how long have you been aware of SDA Q&A? Not how many episodes you've watched, but how long have you been aware of SDA Q&A? My guest today, Kelly Nelson, has only recently become aware of us and already is on the show. So a lot of us who are very fascinated with the post questions on doctrine, Adventism, and comparing it to pre and post. A lot of us talk about how influential Bob Brinsmead was in those late 60s, early days. Perhaps nothing to do with QOD, but he certainly made a big impact on the church. So, it's great to have you on the program to share some thoughts. Tell us a little bit about yourself first, and then we'll segue that into how you met Bob and the Awakening movement. First, tell us, what is the Awakening movement, so that people know off the bat what we're talking about.
It was a movement in the Adventist church that had to do, well, depending on what time frame. In '69, it was about the special gift of God um, uh, doing something special in our heart. Um, I think we could kind of relate that to the sealing of the Holy Spirit. You're glued into what you're thinking about your relationship with Jesus, and you're not moved. The one of the Well, we can probably get into that later, but one of the big texts at that time when I first heard Bob was Acts 3:19, talking about repent and, and for the blotting out of sins at the time of refreshing. Now, I don't have a Bible in front of me, but uh, that was glued into the sanctuary service. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I was raised a Seventh-day Adventist, born in Washington State, raised in Southern California, went most of my schooling in Adventist schools. Um, Very good Adventist parents, and taught me well. I think my dad was a general contractor. My mother uh, became a nurse, and anyway, that's a little bit there. My dad actually built the main concrete shell of the sanitarium there in Deer Park. They're just below Angwin in the PUC area. And both of my girls were born there right at the hospital in Deer Park. So uh, anyway,
Yeah, that's interesting. So
I
you're cemented with Adventism.
yeah, I went to 4 different academies. Um, I went to
And what kind of time
Redlands.
frame is that? What years were the academy experiences?
That I graduated in '68, so you have to do the math backwards. Uh, I went my freshman year. I was in Redlands, then I went to Loma Linda, and then I went to San Pasqual for a half a year. My folks had moved up to PUC area. They lived in St. Helena, and I got homesick. So I left in the middle of the year and started going to PUC prep and graduated. My senior year was 1968.
Right.
You know, I was as a senior, I was up in the library in the at the school there at PUC prep, and I read this book by Jacques, and he was a pastor in Russia, and he had escaped and went down to China, and then eventually got over to the United States. And I heard that he was down in Elmshaven, and I wanted to go talk with him. So I went down to Elmshaven and found out that he was the husband of Ellen White's granddaughter, which she was showing stuff around Elmshaven where. So
Wow.
I got her aside and with nobody else around and talked about her life as a grandkid. So,
That is amazing. Can you recall any of the things she said?
oh yeah, a few things. We didn't talk long. I wanted to talk with her husband, and she said that he put that experience behind him. It was so dramatic, you know. He
What,
wrote
the
a book.
Adventist experience?
No, her husband, Mr. Jacques or Pastor Jacques, I don't
Yeah.
know what you want to his escape from Russia.
Oh, right.
He
Right.
was being persecuted because he was a pastor, and then he escaped, and he did all these things miraculously escaping out of Russia from Siberia. Some I can't pronounce it now.
Yeah.
Anyway, But I wanted to talk
Interesting.
with him, and she said he don't want to talk about that anymore. He wrote the book, and that's it. He wants to put that out of his life. You know, how many of us come to situations we just don't want to talk about anymore?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, this is one of the first times that I'm talking about my experience there in college with the awakening movement. So, you know, sometimes you just go forward. My dad used to say, don't look back, look forward. But then I love that the Psalms 139 chapter where David says, he works before me and behind me. And sometimes I say, Lord, help the work that I did behind me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's good to
because
reflect on the past.
sometimes you feel, you know, everybody leaves kind of a trail. Then you go clean up the house. You can tell somebody's been here or there. Sometimes I feel like I make messes and God has to work behind me and clean them up. uh,
All right.
anyway,
But back to was it the granddaughter of Ellen G. White? Did you say?
yeah, yes.
Did you have any other memories of anything else she said? How old would,
Oh,
and this is the late 60s, how old would she have been at that time?
boy, I don't know. She was an
Like,
older woman.
yeah,
Uh, you know, you don't ask women their age.
no,
Uh,
generally speaking, young, middle
yeah,
aged.
I have some Ukrainian neighbors that are refugees out of Ukraine right now, and their kids are in our school across the street from where I live. And the lady came over and says, "How old are you?" I says, "Well, if you tell me how old you are, I'll tell you how old I am." And of course, she had to talk through her daughter because she doesn't know English, only Ukrainian. But anyway, no, my experience there with her granddaughter, I can't even remember her name. I just remember it was her granddaughter. She told what it was like with Ellen White and being around the house there at Elms Haven and some of the experiences that she had. And I thought that was interesting. I know I after I got out of high school, I always wanted to go into medicine. So I took an orderly class, and I I worked at the sanitarium there, the hospital there, for a while, and became very. I decided medicine was not for me, so I changed my major several times in college. One of the patients there was not an Adventist, and he was an older fellow, and he came into the hospital, and he knew Ellen White, and I thought that was kind of interesting that her influence beyond just the church. But anyway,
Mm.
oh, getting back to how did I get involved in the awakening movement? Maybe we can kind of
Yeah.
go into that. It's kind of interesting because I had graduated from PUC prep, and that summer I was living in the village, and a neighbor says, "I want you to read this article." I said, "Oh, okay." So I sat down and I read it, and he asked me from some input. I says, "Well, there's nothing wrong with that. I see that that's from this. I could see it was correct with the scripture as far as I was concerned. It's correct from what I had read in Ellen White." And he says, "You know what? This was later on after I read it." I says, uh, "The speaker's going to be here on such and such a date. Uh, would you pass these out in the dorm?" Because by that time I ended up being in the dorm at PUC. Before the summer was over, I ended up being in the dorm. So I said, "Yeah, sure, I'll do that." And then I found out it was from Robert Brinsmead. That would kind of pricked my interest. Here, I passed these out. I didn't know what I was doing. But, and anyway, I said, well, I'll go hear what he has to say. And
what year was this?
oh, that was in '69. Uh, yeah, 1969. So anyway, he came several times in the PUC area, so that caused me to read what the church had put out, because my family said that's an offshoot. And well, what's the definition of an offshoot? Well, that's somebody who's taking tithe money and supporting their ministry. I said, wow.
Right.
Anyway, so he came one time to speak, and I had done some research from what the church had written about him, and what was wrong with the quote Brinsmead offshoot situation. And reading that and listening to him and reading his material, things didn't line up. And I said, whoa, what's wrong with the picture here? I can remember one time he came and he was sitting in the PUC church, and I'm still eyeing this guy off, trying to decide, well, what's with this this guy? Because he speaks very fluently, very clarity. It's not story time; it's educational time, going through the Bible in the spirit of prophecy. And I was impressed. And I watched him one time. He came and he was sitting in the PUC church. And I'm still having these thoughts of what this is all about, as far as, is this an offshoot or not, or what's going on here? And I watched him put in the offering money in the offering plate, and I'm thinking to myself, they're calling him an offshoot because he receives tithes, and yet he's supporting the church.
Yeah,
That doesn't make sense to me. Well, during that time, one of the chemistry teachers, um, Jim Larson, they didn't renew his contract. In other words, he got fired because he was helping Brinsmead out. And his wife, I think, was, I can't remember the guy's name. I think it was a cousin that helped set up programs, or do the technical stuff to set it up before Robert came to the States. And I think he died of an aneurysm later in the 70s. It was early 70s sometime. But anyway, I became friends with the Larsons. Neighbor was, I was friend with my neighbor. One time he took me over to a what do they call that? It was an Adventist Reformed church, and we talked with some of the leaders there, and that was interesting. But anyway, it tells you a little bit about my journey there. But in 1970, the Pope came to Australia, and Bob and John Brinsmead started studying really deeply into the Reformation and what that was all about, what was justification all about, and it changed his emphasis a little bit. And he came back to the United States, and they had a meeting with the General Conference. And the General Conference told him, hey, you're just picking on the Seventh-day Adventists here. Why don't you go to the other Protestant churches? I think that Bob was hoping to have his membership back, is what I think. It's trying to resolve the conflict, because the Awakening movement had become quite a large movement in the church. instead of that, it was like, go to the other Protestant churches.
Yeah.
Which he took up that challenge, and they had printed out a material. It was called Present Truth. Some may have remembered that. I don't know.
Mm. And that then morphed into I know it well. I just got a mental blank. Someone will write it in the comments for me.
And,
Yeah.
anyway,
Very popular magazine that continued on for years, didn't it?
I don't know. I know that several things were happening in my life at that time. This is just a part of it. I was falling in love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we know why that's a bit. Those that are watching, sadly, Kelly is just his wife has passed recently, and so our hearts go out to you there, Kelly. Someone's just reminded me it was Verdict magazine. It switched from Plain Truth to Verdict.
Yeah.
At some point.
And,
yeah.
I had that going on. I got married in 1970. Ended up having a daughter in 72. They had after my wife passed away, I went down to California to visit my oldest daughter, which lives in Fresno now. And her and her husband took me out to view all over the area down there. And one of the places was Yosemite. And we're coming up to Yosemite, and there's a little campground before you get into the park. It's called Sugar Pine. And in 1972, we had I'm probably using it was kind of like a training session on this what was happening with the Reformation and justification by faith, and there was syllabuses that they have. The reason I kind of remember it was in June of 1970, because it was shortly after my oldest daughter was born, and they wanted to put us in a tent, and I didn't like that. We finally talked them into letting us be in the cabin because my daughter was so young.
Yeah, of course. So this
But
was, sorry to interrupt, but this was at an awakening kind of camp.
yes,
Yeah.
it was a seminar. They had syllabus and went through the Reformation's view of justification by faith, and it was very, very interesting.
Yeah. So they were
Learned a
getting
lot.
quite organized by now.
I think it's always been organized.
Yeah. Okay. So even from the start, one of the gifts that Bob had was maybe pulling people together that had certain skills that could organize his trips and meetings and tours and conferences, etc.
Yeah, Betty Larson. I believe it was. I'm not sure. I can't even remember his name. I think it was her cousin that did a lot of that footwork. Um, anyway, if somebody can remember that guy's
Yeah,
name,
someone watching can give us that information, I'm sure. Yeah.
anyway, I there was I had some friends that was down in San Diego. I went down there, and Bob had rubbed shoulders with some of the Protestant churches, and there was a evangelical church that he gave a sermon in, and so I went down there and listened to what he had to say, and a very good sermon. But the flack he got from the other side, the other Protestant
Yeah.
churches. Oh, this guy's been an Adventist, and there
Yeah.
was quite an uproar. So he's gotten pressure from. I can see where he could be against organized Christianity.
Mm.
But anyway, and I can remember one time, John, I went to they were in Sacramento, staying in Sacramento, and there was a state hotel or something they were staying in, and John gave a sermon, and this was after their study of the Reformation. Very good sermon, very hot, very crowded, not very many people there. But what really interested me is after the sermon, a person off the street, having no religious background at all, he says, I can see that we can develop well, I'm not the right exact words, but I can see how we can have a relationship with Jesus and be free about it. There's no pressure. I thought that was interesting. But before he came over, after their studies and they came to the United States, just before they came over, he had a rock go through their windshield and almost took him out. And they kind of felt like at that time that the devil didn't want him to come. Providential that saved him. I have a little experiences like that myself. I mean, after my wife and I got married in 1970, we started colportering, and we didn't have a lot of money. We were staying with a host family. People were hosting us while we colported all summer. We didn't have much money to our name. It was like $400 between us, and that whittled down to about $200. And I says, we had good experiences, but I guess we weren't good salesmen, or something happened. We didn't make money. So we got towards the end of the summer, and I says, honey, we got to go back up to college and find a place to live. And we're newlyweds, didn't have a honeymoon. Just started colporting right after we got married, which we got married in Lodi. And we went up to the college, and in one day, we found a place to live. We bought a trailer, a small trailer. We both had jobs at the end of one day. And then this is, I got to share this with you. Some things you don't know about marriage life as a man until after you get married. Maybe that's an understatement. If you're married, you probably know that. Anyway, during our colporting time, we were poor, and she had one pair of nylons. We wore those all summer long. She'd wash them at the end of the day and go out the next day. Not a single runner. We got back to college, and it seemed like every week we had to put out more money for new nylons. I think that was kind of a miracle.
An extra cost when you came back to be a student.
Yeah. Well, an eye opener how God provided while you were working and you were poor.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's not always the P&L statement that counts. It's how God makes everything work in between.
The little things.
Yes.
So, when did the awakening start? I should know that. I've talked to Bob himself about that.
Well,
just
depends on.
refresh my memory.
I don't know when that terminology came up, because I don't think Bob ever really wanted, quote, to start a new church. I don't think he ever wanted to be called an offshoot. And instead of being called Brinsmeads, somewhere along the line that came up. And it was before 1970. Um, and I didn't get involved with the
organization.
act until 1969. So I think that was prior to that. I know there was a lot of hostility in the church. I'd be sitting in the church at PUC, and it seems like they were rebuffing or trying to have sermons to
warn people.
Anyway, so I'm not a person that likes confrontations.
Right.
So my wife and I, we went out to Middletown to church, and we helped out there. Better than confrontation is get busy and do something good. So we taught primaries. We became a part of that church for a while. We painted the primary room. I remember that. And then one of the teachers, Bible teachers, came out there and he looked at what we'd done, and it changed his whole attitude. There wasn't so much confrontation, at least with me. I mean, some people lost their jobs. I mean, the Larsons lost their job, and it was kind of interesting. I went up to see my relatives, my new relatives, after I got married, up in Oregon, her grandparents, and found out that he had been disfellowshipped because of the awakening movement. In fact, I still have some literature that he gave me from those early days. Um, he was disfellowshipped because somebody gave him a tract that had Brinsmead's name on it, and he hadn't even read it yet. And they wouldn't let him back into church.
Wow.
That tells you the kind of hostility there was in the church for this movement that was quite, I believe, quite large. And I think it still has some effect on the church, those teachings clear to today.
Do you remember what it was that the church was so worried about? Tell us a little bit about what was the ideology behind the awakening movement. What was Bob really preaching into that movement? And why was the church so worried? We've spent a lot of time talking about Des Ford and Glacier View, and lots of people were defrocked and kicked out by similar things. You know, oh, you were looking at, you went to see Des Ford. Oh, you've lost your job. So there's a similar thing going on there within the church that likes to kind of control a little bit the ideology. But I'm just interested to know what is the awakening ideology that they disagreed with so much?
Well, I don't think it was so much a disagreement as there was a stigma that this was an offshoot. That's my opinion. But before I go into that, kind of losing my thought here, I wanted to explain a little bit what happened during that time in my life.
Yeah.
I ended up graduating from Napa JC with a degree in ornamental horticulture. Worked at a nursery, and then went on to work at the Nut Tree Restaurant, which is not there anymore, but it was a fairly large restaurant. They had an airport there, a little train that took people up to the restaurant, family restaurant. It was alongside the freeway between San Francisco and Reno, so people would stop by and eat there. And it was kind of a fancy place. I remember one time they catered. Anheuser-Busch put in a brewery not far from there, and they catered a golf tournament, and Gerald Ford was, and a lot of celebrities came there, flew in or drove in or whatever. But anyway, I was involved in that. So, and I got involved in Pathfinders. So I was a pretty busy person and didn't follow too much of what was happening with, quote, the awakening movement during that time. So it's kind of interesting to hear an interview with Bob, because I kind of lost track of people. I
Right.
lost track. If somebody knows where the Larsons are, I'd be love to hear that. I'd like to get
Yeah.
back in touch.
There might be some
But
people watching that can help us with that.
anyway, so I would say there's 69 to 74. That's mainly my history there with the awakening. Now, to answer your question, I personally don't think it was over the details so much, although there's a lot written. They looked at Bob as being a perfectionist, uh, but
It wasn't too
there's a
different
period.
to what they were teaching anyway.
What?
It wasn't too different to what they were teaching anyway.
Oh, there's a period of time where Jesus says, "Up, who's holy, be holy still; who's filthy, be filthy." Whatever
Mm.
in Revelation, and I think that it had to do with that point, that there's a special time where God's going to give a gift to us. I think that's still applicable today. I think that well, like Bob would put it, he would get a broomstick and he'd put it on his palm of his hand and then he'd balance it. Well, you can't balance it very good until you're looking
And
up at the top. If you look down at the bottom, you lose your balance.
that's a
And
good one.
he used that as an illustration that we should be looking at what God has done for us instead of focusing so much on ourselves and looking at what He's going to be doing in us.
Mm.
So I thought that that was a very good illustration of what he was trying to teach during the 70s.
Mm. Was that an inference also that if you keep your eyes on Jesus, you'll also be able to not sin? You'll be able to kind of have a bit of a, because would you say that his view at that time was that you could and needed to lead a sinless life to get the salvation
No,
happening? So tell us
no,
the nuances of that
no,
teaching.
no. I think the church kind of portrayed it that way, but that's not the way it was at all.
Interesting. Share what you think it was that he was trying to teach.
If you read in Hebrews, it talks about Jesus will give us a new heart. That's His work, not our work. And there's going to come a time when, during the close of probation, He's going to say, "Those that are righteous be righteous still." So if you're focused up there, something's going to happen down in here, and Ellen White kind of puts that as a ceiling. And that's not something that you go out and try to concoct on your own.
Do you think like
It's it's kind of like a person is sick and Jesus is going to heal them. Well, He healed the people that had faith in Him, but the people that didn't have faith in Him, what happened? They didn't get the healing. So it's focusing on Jesus, keeping your eyes up at the top of the broom instead of down here on your. You
mm,
know, when I was first baptized, I was baptized in 1962, and after baptism, I had a terrible time. You know, it's just like you tried to do what was right and things didn't quite turn out right. And then you felt guilty. And then you said to yourself, well, if I straighten this out, I can fix my relationship with Jesus. What a backwards thinking.
Yeah, I often
I
say
can,
that about playing the guitar. You enjoy the guitar and the playing kind of takes care of
yeah,
itself.
I went to Samba Squall. I went to 4 different academies. And one of them, I think I mentioned this already, it was down at Samba Squall. And I had pieced together this judgment hour and Christ dying for us. And I got to thinking, I would have people say, "Are you ready yet? Are you
Mm.
ready for Jesus to come?" I'm looking at my internal self and saying, no.
Yeah.
And so I went to the one of the Bible teacher, and this was really bugging me. And so I says, tell me what the good news is. I'm not finding good news in this. You know, I didn't get an answer. And
Mm.
it wasn't until the awakening movement that I got that answer.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what was it about the awakening movement that appealed to you more than the Adventist church, the
Well,
mainstream, what it was teaching?
well,
Like you said, you got the answer, but what was that answer?
I don't distinguish. I don't look at it the same way that you're looking at it.
Right.
I think that the Adventist movement has always, well, let me rephrase that. If you look at the core belief that we believe, and you look at what Ellen White has wrote, and you look at the scriptures, I don't think that there's any difference. But there were people emphasizing um, good works and shaping up your life, especially during the 50s. And a lot of our young people have left the church because of that.
Mm.
Ellen White was used like a hammer, and quotations were spit out, and you walked away feeling really bad about to say, that's it. Not going
Mm.
to have it anymore.
Mm. Mm.
so, so but I have a friend that's, well, I shouldn't say a friend. I know him. What do you call a friend when you don't see him very often?
A friend.
Anyway, he's a union president right now. Before he was a union president, he was a conference president, a local conference
Mm.
president. And I was sitting down with him, and he wanted to share something with us. It was a little training thing, and there wasn't very many people there. I think it was just my wife and another person or two. I mean, it was a very small group, but they didn't show up. So it was just a few of us there. And he laid out before us an illustration of the sanctuary. I could have taken that right out of Bob's Brinsmead material.
Interesting.
I, I, I've seen this. I've seen this before. This diagram before, and you know, so I think that the movement still has effect on the church even today, in
Mm.
part. Um, and I know I went to a church for a few years that my kids liked, and they quit going to it because they kind of got sidetracked or whatever, and that they liked the music, which was really good. Sometimes the music in church is so hard to
Mhm.
sing those some of the newer songs are so much better, right?
Yes.
But it was, oh, what do they call that? When a church first starts up, it's not a complete church yet, but its mission was to gear to a certain group of Adventist people, and so they were kind of liberal in their thinking. But in fact, everything was by volunteer. Pastor was volunteer. They had another person that helped out as a pastor, and the comment was made one time, well, the 1844, all that stuff was good at one time, but we got to move on. You
Who
know.
who said that?
I'm not saying names.
No, but was that, I mean, I don't mean names, but was that someone on this awakening side was suggesting that?
No,
Oh,
no,
okay, right, right. Because awakening
no.
wouldn't want to do away with Ellen White's authority or 1844.
You know, they had a girl that was at the academy, and she went and practiced the music at there where we were going to church, at another place. So she came along for the ride because it was our trip from Auburn to Olympia was a ways to go. It was like a way or better. So I would take her there, and I came back, and one of the ladies was so upset. Says, "I can't believe the pastor says that the commandments don't abide anymore, the 10 Commandments." And I says, "Well, you know, I think you probably I didn't talk with him. I says, I think you probably misunderstood him, because I don't think God said that. I don't think he meant that we should have other gods. I don't think he meant that we should uh, make God out to be what he's not, kind of like making images. I don't think he meant that we should defame his name. I don't think he meant that we should not keep the Sabbath and dishonor his creative power. I don't think he meant that we should dishonor our parents." So I kind of went down the line. And anyway, but some things happen in our church that, you just scratch your head at. I remember as a kid, I went with my uncle and aunt, and we went to the North Hill Hollywood Church, or the North Hollywood Church. And I was surprised a couple of years ago they had ordained a cross-dresser. That what? Anyway, so there's various facets in the Adventist church right now. In our conference, I think they had some pastors that had some transgender people, and anyway, it's a mixed bag in our church. I mean, if you're looking for a traditional Adventist, I think I'm traditional.
Yeah, okay.
There's a lot of non-traditional Adventists.
Yeah.
And I think we should, I think we should accept people, but it's quite another thing to, that story in Corinthians about Paul talking about this guy that is having a relationship with his mother. He said, "Well, that's not good."
Yeah,
You need
yeah.
relation. And a lot of times the church was so authoritarian, and it's almost moved to the other direction, and now it's gone so far the other way, it may start sliding back the other way. It's kind of like a pendulum. What is it with our church right now? This last general conference, and they brought in the flags, and they had the flag of the
That's right.
papacy.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that was interesting.
What's with that?
Yeah.
But
are you suggesting that with the Brinsmead awakening, that in some ways it brought you into a better understanding of what you're calling traditional Adventism, and was an important part to bringing you into harmony with Adventism rather than propelling you away from it? Because it seems like you're just saying, I'm a traditional Adventist, the awakening movement, you love the message, you're talking about that really great the broom kind of analogy, keeping your eye on the top to keep balanced. It seems like the awakening movement had a really positive effect on you.
Well, I would look at it more as it gave me a clearer understanding of my relationship with God and what he's promised to do for me, and I don't worry about it. If I have habits I can't take care of, I talk with him and say, "I'm sorry I failed, but you promised to write your law in my heart, and I want you to do that. I'm not going to fight it anymore. I'm not going to struggle. I'm going to let you do your work."
So letting go.
I'm not going out of my way to just do it all by myself, because I can't do it.
Mm.
And so I'm not focused on that so much.
Yeah.
I'm focused more on my relationship with him and what he's doing to me. Do we have to go back to the Elvis Presley song? You may not
I love Elvis.
you may doubt what believe. You may doubt the way I feel, but I know he's real because his hand's in mine.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting when I hear like a Doug Batchelor program and I see people in there, I get a sense that they're really focusing on Jesus. There's a lot of camaraderie, there's a warmth there, they're enjoying the process. I'm getting a feeling of I can imagine you in a meeting with Bob Brinsmead and feeling quite warm and focused, and it's giving you a good sense of positivity. And I look at a lot of the Des Ford stuff, and I've been to some of his meetings where there's a real sense of the good news, and yet all three, and then you bring in the administration, they clash. But everyone seems to be trying to look at the same thing. Everyone's trying to look at the top of the broom handle and balance it and stay focused on that. I wonder why there's such animosity between those groups. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know how to answer that, but I think the devil's at work.
Interesting.
And he works the hardest with the people on top. Now, I've been in positions in the church and I've made mistakes. And I'm not proud of them. I don't want to talk about them. But I tried to do my best to stay focused on Jesus and do better.
Yeah. Well, we're all flawed.
Yes.
Can I
But
read? Sorry, go ahead.
I think that what happens is Lucifer works the hardest on the people on top. And there's a lot of pride when you get on top. And same thing that happened with the Jewish leaders happens sometimes to the people that are on top. And they need our prayers.
Can I
It's
read? Sorry.
easy to criticize and pull people down, but I think it's much better to pray. I wasn't supposed to be born. I born really premature, and my mother prayed and prayed for me. And I'm a miracle child.
Mm.
And that taught me the power of prayer, the praying for your children. And God can do stuff that you can't do. Sometimes you just have to let the situation go and let God work.
But in all of it, finding some kind of focus on a I like that saying, God is love, because it can apply. An agnostic can embrace that, and a believer can embrace that, because love seems to be, and I'm not talking about cliche love songy stuff, I'm talking about that deep love connection. It seems to be a theme that runs through all community, family, friendships, our existence. We need to focus on that, don't we?
If we was to boil it all down into about one sentence, everything, all those that will be in heaven will be there because they would enjoy it there, and everybody that wouldn't enjoy it there won't be there.
That's a good way of looking at it. I want to read an excerpt from a website that talks a little bit about the awakening and Brinsmead. I'd be interested in your reflections on that. And I want people who are watching, if you could put in the comments any questions you'd like to ask Kelly. And also, I'd then like to get your thoughts, Kelly, on why Bob then took a path that was to take him eventually away from the Christian faith, allegedly. I got that feeling when I chatted to him, but I'm not sure. We were due another interview where he was going to unpack the next stage of his life, so we didn't get to that yet, but we're planning to. So I'm interested in your thoughts on how did the awakening movement process that? Their leader is leaving, taking on new kind of pastures. So I'm interested in your thoughts of that. And I'm really keen for those watching to please share any info you have about awakening. Are they still going? Does anyone know where the Larsons are? And I'll just quickly share this and read this. I'll just bring it up onto the screen, and then I'll read it and get some of your feedback there. So this is Life Assurance Ministries on their website. They're, I think, Dale Ratzlaff. I think that's his movement. Yeah, Life Assurance Ministries was founded in 2000 by Dale Ratzlaff, former Adventist pastor and author of many books and articles on Adventism. So I'm just reading from his website, their website. This is sorry.
I can't read it. It's too small a print.
Oh, okay. You'll just have to listen then. I've just got it up there as a prop. I can't enlarge it for some reason.
That's okay.
But I'll read it out to you, and you can give me your thoughts. So this is about the Awakening by Martin L. Carey. I'm just going to read a paragraph or two. For 3 decades, the Brinsmead agitation challenged Adventist leadership on several continents. During the years I was growing up, the conflict over his teachings became so intense that showing any agreement with Brinsmead's heresy could get one expelled. And this I saw firsthand. Many pastors lost their jobs or left the ministry voluntarily because they espoused Brinsmead's theology. For his followers, even mentioning the name of Brinsmead could put one's membership at risk. Moreover, much Adventist literature published in the 1970s was aimed at correcting Brinsmead's influence. Then in the late 70s, he began not merely working within, but separating from Adventism. And by 1990, he had moved entirely out of the Christian faith. And that goes on, and people can go and check that out if they just go to lifeassuranceministries.org and type in Awakening. It'll be the first thing that comes up, even if you search it just on Google. Some of the things you said confirm that person's assessment as well. And it's almost like identical. The church was dealing with this behind the scenes and publicly as well in the 70s, and then along comes Des during that time as well, but with a different focus, and we have the 80s filled with that kind of suppression, and you lose your job if you associate with someone. I like your analogy and reminder of his teaching, the holding the broom. I like that one. I've used it myself when I used to be a special ed teacher, but the way you've framed it is interesting. And I liked your little sentence there too about what the people that get to heaven are those that want to be there, and this focusing on love. And with my thoughts on, you go to a traditional Adventist program, I often feel a sense of sublime, sacred feeling there. I felt that at the more progressive Adventist venues as well. And in many ways, I'm often surprised by we hear these things, we're inspired by them. You're sharing meetings you went to that really help to give you a focus, and we can get that from Des Ford, we can get that from Bob Brinsmead, but it interests me as we step back from that to see all the hullabaloo going on as well. I'm interested in your thoughts on that and what we just read.
I'm trying to put my words in the right order. I don't want to step on anybody's feelings.
No, you won't.
Secondly, what happens in another person's life, we can't we can't really tell for sure. We can only surmise. Um, but I would say that all the feedback that Bob got from the church after meeting with them and trying to be reconciled, and I think he always wanted to have his membership back. This, I'm giving you a subjective thing here.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I think the flack that he got from the Protestant churches when I gotta share this one with you. I'm talking about the Protestant churches, but anyway, I think the flack that he got from there, left a bad taste in his mouth. I think that the studying from historical viewpoint, um, a lot of you get into a lot of quote people that are well educated or whatever. Instead of taking the witnesses that we have in the scripture and you're putting more emphasis on quote intellectuals, I think that was devastating to him from my point of view. Um, but everyone's on a journey. God is wanting to save everybody, and I don't care if you're a pope or you're a leader of a big nation and you got stuff going on. God's doing what he can to pull you in the right direction. Um, but that's my subjective
Yeah.
analysis, and I could be wrong. And I just that from my own experience.
Mm.
Now I wanted to share a little tidbit
Yes. Yeah.
because this this movement not only affected the Seventh-day Adventist Church when they were given a challenge to work with the other Protestant churches in America. A lot of people don't realize how far that actually went.
Right. Yeah, I had no idea it went outside of Adventism.
I was I saw a neighbor of mine come out and she had one of the Present Truths in her hand. She was not an Adventist. And I started talking with her about the emphasis of the Reformation, and as we were finding out as Bob was studying that, and she says, "You know what? You would love to come and hear my pastor speak." I said, "Oh, fine. You know, I'm not opposed to going visiting a different church, a Sunday church." And we got there, and I was shocked, and she was embarrassed. He went down all the different Protestant churches and what was wrong with them, including the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And of course, he had a misunderstanding of what I think we believe as a church, but there was reasons for why maybe he was saying what he was saying. We give an impression that we're kind of legalistic,
Yeah.
especially during the 50s. And that was, I think, wrong because it was people didn't focus on they
They,
didn't focus on their Bibles. They didn't focus on Ellen White, what
they
they
need
were
to
saying.
stop. They need to stop printing great controversy and stop giving millions of copies away. That might help. That's a start, anyway.
Anyway,
That's very interesting. That's just reminded me of a similar story. I used to run a recording studio, and a guy that recorded an album there, we kind of became friends, and he was a Baptist guy. And years later, we were chatting, and he realized I was an Adventist, of course, and at the time, and he said, "Oh, I'm really interested in becoming a Seventh-day Adventist." And I said, "What?" This was on my way out. He was starting to want to come in, and I'm going, "Hang on a second, let's have a little conversation here." um, what's inspired you? And he went over to his place for dinner, and he said, "Take a look at this." And he opens his cupboard, and he has every single copy of Plain Truth and Verdict magazine. I was chatting to him about it just the other day. He wants me to take a picture of it and send it to Bob Brinsmead. And I said, that's probably not Adventism. It's almost in my way of thinking. And that's post-awakening, isn't it, really? Would you say Verdict and Plain Truth is a tangent to awakening?
like I said, when the verdict came out, I didn't read very many of those. I was busy in my life,
Right.
and I lost contact with what was going on in the awakening movement.
Right.
There,
Okay. So you'd already
uh,
gained the benefits. Can
it
I
was it.
go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. It was
Well, I was busy in my life with, you know, being in Pathfinders, working, and Pathfinders is almost a full time job. And then when you're working a full time job,
well, yeah.
uh, you know, anyway.
So were you then aware of? So those watching, tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure the verdict era, as opposed to the awakening era, is a defining difference for Bob Brinsmead. He'd moved away from his awakening teachings. So I'm interested, those watching, if you could confirm if that's true or not. And yeah, so did you notice anything about that transition, Bob leaving? Did you keep in touch with any of the awakening members who, or awakening, not members, but those associated with it? Did you
No,
hear anything about them being upset about that at all?
no.
Interesting. So the light had shone on you, it had worked its magic, and you kind of went on with your life.
More or less, yeah.
Yeah.
I I I went into ornamental horticulture instead of into medicine, and my dream job was to work in one of our schools on the grounds, and my wife be maybe in charge of the library or something like that. She had a double major, social studies and library science, and I was offered a job at PUC,
Mm.
and I I told them, you know, if I have to give up what I believe because I was associated with Robert Brinsmead, I don't want to come.
Wow, that is interesting. Wow.
So I ended up, after working at the Nut Tree, I ended up working for Auburn Adventist Academy in Washington.
Mm.
Uh, I was I was a grower for the greenhouses, and the fellow that was in charge of the grounds had relatives up there, and he came by and stopped and went through the greenhouses and saw what we were doing.
Wow. And you were doing a good job.
Well, I think so. I'm
He thought
I'm
that.
I'm,
He thought that. He,
I'm kind of prejudiced there, but it went through changing of hands and bankruptcy and all that kind of stuff, and
yeah.
eventually I started my own business. I worked for Harris Pine, and of course that went through some drama.
Is that the
Uh,
famous pine that's mentioned in Doug Hackerman's book? Is it those watching, tell me if I'm right. There was a famous pine something company that went through all sorts of problems and issues within Adventism. What was that?
Harris
Is
Pine,
this the one?
Harris Pine was a manufacturer of furniture for our kids. It was a school industry, and they were all over the country.
Right.
I um, and I was in. I worked out in the yard first. So one time I was working out there, and they had me running a planer, and oh, they dry killed the red alder, and the boss took us out there, and we had to put um, a 2x4 or 4x4s underneath the loads while he was changing those that were stickered, and they were trying to take the moisture out of the wood before it went into the mill. And I'm sitting there and I'm saying, Lord, I can't handle this. I'm not physically able to do this. He tapped me on the shoulder and reminded me of Samson. I said, okay. So I went back and worked on the the planer, the outside planer. These boards were like almost 2 inches thick and maybe 10, 12 feet long, and maybe um, 6, 8 inches wide. So you have to flip them up on the planer and run them through. And I didn't think I could handle that. Uh,
But am I right with the Harris Pine being equally as big as the Davenport fiasco and saga, or am I just totally misremembering? Is that a word?
I think it was probably bigger. You know, I hate to get into some of these because it sheds a bad light on people that make mistakes at the top. But
in some ways, though, it also creates a sense of. I remember I won't mention who I interviewed, but I remember interviewing someone that had obviously gotten into some trouble with the white estate, and I said, do you regret kind of doing what you did? And he just went, oh, that's life. We make mistakes. And I like that. Sometimes if we're being real and opening up about the fact that we're real and people make mistakes, it can make us less judgmental as well.
Well, they had a committee meeting to decide, because when a company gets too big and the church is involved, they're always afraid if things go south and they have to pull it through, they don't have the money to do it. So then they're striving to get themselves separated from the entity a little bit more.
Right.
And when they closed up, see that whole system was donated to them by an Adventist fellow, and him and his wife had figured out how to set it up so it would go on to the end of time.
Right.
Had enough wood and enough backing to carry that through forever.
Yeah.
Well, they had a committee meeting whether to hang on to that or not, and it passed, and they were supposed to hang on to it. Well, they didn't like that, so they had another meeting and they hand selected the people for the committee, and then they ran it through bankruptcy. The guy that I don't forget what you call it. They hire somebody that
like the liquidator.
Liquidate the assets.
Yeah.
He ended up being a millionaire. I don't think it was an Adventist fellow, but anyway.
That's interesting.
But there's a lot of I've seen that. I hate talking about
people come in and take advantage, don't they? But you're not. It's not. I know it's.
You have people.
Not that we're being negative. It's just these. It's guards us in being discerning. The more we can know and identify these kind of people, the more we can discern. Let's not let them into our pasture, and let's not let them into our pen. So we're just discerning the kind of people. Not that all liquidators are bad at all, but we need to discern the kind of people that are going to, take advantage of. A lot of Adventists are inside the religion. I'm not meaning it badly, but are a little bit soft when it comes to the world. And there's people on the outside that go, "Oh, here we go. We could make some money off these little softies." And they do. So there's nothing wrong with talking about some of these harsh realities and the people that try and take advantage of us.
I guess that wasn't my point. The point was that it should never have gone into bankruptcy to begin with.
Right.
That was my point.
Right. How so?
A guy makes a killing off of liquidating the assets, and you had enough assets to pull you through. You should never have gone bankrupt in the first place.
Exactly. Yeah, I see.
I didn't know how was it.
But isn't that confirming what I'm saying? That he's like that wolf. He comes in. The people that were soft on the inside were taken advantage of because there were obviously assets that they could have sold to not go bankrupt.
I don't think he was a wolf. He was just hired by the state or by the courts to liquidate the
But
assets.
how did he make the millions?
Liquidating the assets because he got a certain percentage of everything he liquidated.
But didn't you say they shouldn't have gone bankrupt because the assets should
The,
have covered?
the church should never have let it go into bankruptcy. That was not his fault. He was designated by the court.
Right. So it's a little bit like someone claiming debts and regaining debts, someone hiring a debt collector and they get a percentage of the debts they get back.
Oh, I could go on with more stories, but I hate to dwell on negativity.
Yeah. Hey, look, the majority of our conversation has been super positive, and we're going to make sure we'll conclude with a very positive note as well. But it just interested me mainly was I speaking about the right company that we're talking about? And I think we are.
Yeah, Harris Pines. One of my jobs after I worked out in the yard, they put me inside to pack kit packs. They were say like you had a dresser. You put all the parts for 10 dressers in a box, and then you shipped it off to one of the other schools so they could assemble it. And I had to figure out how to put the pattern together, have the kids put the kit pack together, and then ship them out. That was one of my jobs. And then later on, they wanted me to work in the finishing room and be a supervisor in there. And I said, I can't do that. I says, I was born premature and my lungs cannot handle it. And I said, I'll try. I said, okay, I'll try for 2 weeks. I tried for 2 weeks. I couldn't handle it. So they said, okay, we want you to do assembly. I said, I don't know anything about your assembly. You'll have to teach me. Okay, we'll teach you. They spent 30 minutes or an hour and a half, something like that, and showing me how things were set up. I finally learned one brand or one set, bedroom set on how to put it together. And then school was about ready to start, and they came in with there's no directions. You get a kit pack, and there's no assembly directions in it. So they said, okay, you learned that really well. We want you to do this one here for us. I says, well, I don't even know what it looks like. I don't know how to put that together. 30 minutes later, school has started, and I get all the kids, and I have to teach them how to do it.
Oh, my goodness. That's a challenge.
Yeah, I just took everybody aside, and I says, you know what? Some of you have never worked in this furniture factory before. You don't know how things are done or how things are put together. Don't feel bad. We're going to do something. And I don't even know how this thing goes together, but we'll learn it together.
We'll learn it together. Well, that might be a good thing.
Yeah.
When you watch the interview, though, the 1 or 2 interviews, 2 or 3 interviews that I did with Bob Brinsmead, what came back to your mind? Did you have fond memories of him?
I have fond memories of my life and the effect that I had from him. Yes.
And you met him a couple of times too, didn't you? Can you recall some feelings that were associated with those encounters?
I only watched one of the interviews, and it was I don't know how long ago. Was that 4 weeks ago?
No, it would have been
a month ago,
3 years ago that the Bob Brinsmead, but it might have popped up in your feed, because I notice sometimes when I'm away, people comment on things and they pop up to the top. So you may have seen.
Oh, okay. So
yeah.
it
be a good 2 years ago.
Yeah. Anyway,
But for you, it was just a couple of weeks
ago.
Anyway, how did you feel?
Well, you have a lot of good memories back then. I think it made a big impact on my life. It answered the question that I tried to ask that Bible teacher at San Pasquale. It answered that question. and I didn't have an answer before that.
Yeah. That's
What
important.
is
That's
good?
profound.
It's not good news if you're focusing on your life, trying to get it straightened out for the judgment hour. You
Yeah.
can't make sense of how God's death for you made anything. It mutes the good news of the gospel. You're thinking, well, yeah, that's true. He died for me. But now I have to get myself all in shape, ready for his coming.
And do you think that that false idea perception that you had was because people have misunderstood Adventism itself and they're teaching it wrong? Because I mean, I grew up with that kind of Adventism as well, where I didn't, I wasn't just assured of
I
my
did.
salvation, and I was wondering how good I was, and was I good enough? And is that in Adventism at its very DNA, or is that just Adventism being misrepresented? And we need
I
people like Des Ford and Bob Brinsmead to come along and shake us back into the light.
Yeah, yeah. Agitate, but don't irritate.
That's my
Uh,
job. I'm walking that line all the time. Agitate. Am I
and
irritating?
yeah, just don't irritate. you
Uh,
know, uh, I think uh, it's an emphasis that occurred a long time ago, and it's been part of our DNA since 1888. And we haven't got rid of it yet. It's still there, and yet God has sent us message after message trying to pull us out of that.
Mm.
Uh, I
And
think,
what you're saying is one of the reasons that happens is at the very top level. They're the ones most under pressure and easily distracted than the
well,
grassroots person, and that's why
they,
they,
they
you know.
they have a big job to do. There's the financial part of it.
Mm,
Um, there's, and they don't always make good decisions. They make decisions that are based on worldly practices.
mm,
If you take somebody that's working for you, and because they got an illness, you fire them so you don't have to pay the medical. That's not good.
no,
That
that's right. Mm,
that you're looking at your bottom line and you messed it up because people see that and then they
mm,
don't give you their
mm,
funds. They
mm.
send your ties somewhere else.
Yeah. So, in some
And
ways, we can
that,
accept that kind of action by the leadership because, as we've said, they're human also. But in other ways, it's not a bad thing to constantly agitate and keep them accountable as well.
yeah, I think they're much better in some respects than they were during the 50s and 60s.
Have you followed the current sort of leadership of Adventism in recent years?
A little bit, but not a whole lot.
Mm.
I'm like I say, I'm not one that gets into
Yeah.
confrontation. I spend my time trying to do something good. Work
I,
with work with a primary division, help the kids
yeah.
understand.
My advice is don't look into it because it's as bad as it was in the 70s when Brinsmead was being shut down. It's as bad as it was in the 80s when it was being shut down. It's returned to that era, unfortunately. So don't go there. Don't look into it. It'll upset you. I'd like to bring in some comments just to finish off and questions that people may have asked. I've not been looking at them. So I'll just, oh, hang on, where are we? I'll just bring some up onto the screen and then you can make some comments. And
Well, you probably have to read them to me because the screen's kind of small on this.
I'll read them all out for you, definitely.
Yeah. Okay.
And so this is, I'm just trying to see. Don't forget, everyone, if you're writing a comment on Facebook, you need to add your name to it. Unless you want to remain anonymous, that's all right. Okay, so this is Jim Zeideveld. He's watching from Mongolia. I can hear you in Mongolia. No need to shout so loud. That was back earlier when I was asking, are the levels okay? So we'll bring up a few random comments that have been coming through. Ex-SDA here. This is Ali. Still a member on paper, but I haven't attended in more than a decade. Have you officially left the church, or you're still a member somewhere there? Yourself, Kelly, are you still an Adventist member officially?
Oh, yeah. I didn't know who you were talking to.
Yeah,
Yes.
sorry, I left that a bit open just there. But you definitely still are.
Yes.
This is Oliver Nagayan, and he has asked, oh, hang on, wrong one. He has asked not a very nice question of
Oh, it's okay.
Gillian Ford's watching, and he's asked her. So they've had a little side conversation. And this is Oliver Nagoyan. Will Desmond Ford be saved? And I love Gillian's reply. It's all going on here at SDAQ&A today, Kelly. Des Ford will not only be saved, he is going to get a parade. Good reply there, Gillian. What are you thinking, Oliver? That's a ridiculous question, but you can ask it, and I'll say my opinion about it. Oliver, why don't you come on the program and share me your thoughts and views? Faye has said some former SDA members believe something happened in 1844 following the day-year theory, but they're not certain what exactly happened, unlike their knowledge prophecies on Daniel 8. Do you think something happened 1844, October 22, Kelly?
I think that the administration of Jesus was a little different. Yes. And I think something happened in 1844. I think if you take the first part of the prophecy, we see that it lined up when Jesus was born. We see that it lined up with his ministry and his death on the cross and the effect on the Jewish nation at the stoning of Stephen. So I think those all tie in together, and I think yes. I mean, when they when William Miller first did that, he took the dating from the spring because Jewish economy had two dates that started the year. God taught them to take it in the spring. Then when they got a king, they changed that to didn't change it, but they had two different startings of the year in the so that's when we ended up with it in October.
I get the impression if someone was to come on and conclusively demonstrate that the dates are all wrong, that you would still go, yeah, but in the template of Adventism and with the light that I was given through the awakening, my life is good and I'm focused on Jesus, and it wouldn't really make you you wouldn't be discouraged. You wouldn't leave the church over it. I think you've found something that is you're keeping your eye on regardless of, the facts of those dates.
There's going on here in the church that I disagree with. That, like, if you read the scriptures, you think you should lay hands on a cross dresser and ordain them. Yeah, I'm not asking for an answer, but I'm saying that I'm seeing things happen that
is that an official church happening though, or that's just individuals in different churches doing things under their own steam?
Like I'd already mentioned, I don't think it was wise for them to bring in the flag from Rome.
Yeah, that was an interesting thing, wasn't it?
What is with that?
I wonder if that was a mistake. It'd be worth doing a reaction video to that one.
That was not a mistake. And
really?
when you have leaders associating with the Pope, I'm saying, Ellen White said the Protestant churches would step across and hold hands with the Pope. What is with some of our leaders meeting with the Pope? Or the Pope people that are high up in the papacy.
Ellen would
You
be
know,
rolling in her grave.
well, what do you think I feel like?
Yeah, you're alive
Yeah,
and
what
witnessing it.
you're doing?
Well,
You
that
know,
wouldn't that bring you joy that it means we're coming to the end of time?
it makes me sad because I have people that are going down maybe the wrong track, I think.
Let me bring up a couple more here. We've got, I love Shady Visa, Shady Vista. I thought I said Shady Visa. Thanks for watching, Shady Vista. I enjoy when you comment. He's watching from Arkansas. Is that pronounced correct? When I was a kid, I used to say, oh, they're from Arkansas. But it's Arkansas. And Adrian reminded us earlier that it was Verdict magazine. And I tell you what, the guy in there has given me permission to scan, but the pile is like massive. Every Verdict and Plain Truth magazine since the beginning to the end. But he's given me full access to it, and I can go
Wow.
ahead and scan that. I'd love to do that and make it available online. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe they're already online, so maybe someone can tell me before I go to all that expense. And here's some thoughts here that I think you'll already agree with, and kind of I feel like when we're talking about the Harris Pines, you'd come to terms with. It's amazing how SDA camp meetings started with tents, and now in Michigan. Do you say Michigan or Michigan? Michigan, they are sold out beforehand, and they stay in $150,000 motorhomes. They pull in serious dollars. Does it annoy you sometimes, colluding with the Pope and also turning it into a bit of a business? I feel like sometimes that Jesus would come into Adventism and clear out the merchants. Nothing wrong with merchants, but not when they're in the temple.
Exactly. You know, we do a little thing different in Pathfinders than we used to do, and I was teaching they meet on Sabbath. That was the time that people could meet. And together and give them something to do on Sabbath. And so I had to teach the not honor. And some would question, well, is that something that you should be doing on Sabbath? I said, well, you know what? I think it might have been on Sabbath that Jesus went into the temple and grabbed those scraps of
the food, was it?
And weaved a whip really quick and drove them out.
Oh, yes, that's right. He made it a bit of a whip.
If he's doing knots in the temple, I don't see any problem with me teaching you how to do knots on Sabbath.
Yeah, that's right. I was talking about that story of Christ clearing the temple with a whip, and I said that he also whacked them a bit with his sandals. And someone said that's not in the Bible at all. So is that? Can someone tell me? Am I wrong? I've always thought whip and sandals were the two things that he kind of, parlayed around.
That could be a title to a song.
I'll get working on it. Hey, here's another interesting thing, and I bring it up because Kyle was watching earlier. Actually, I won't mention names. And he had a lot to do, shall we say, with this movie that Fred Simons is referring to here. So, Kyle, if you're still watching, I shouldn't have said your name. We'll keep it anonymous. No one can tell. You haven't commented, so it's okay. But Adventists had such tight ranks, yet that porn star, Tommy Amber Purray, was hired to portray Ellen G. White in their movie. Was it Tell the World? Well-produced movie. I tell you what, Kyle, if you're still watching, man, hats off to you for an incredible production. Wow. Amazing. So, but I had heard about that. That may be something we can just take as a comment there, I think, Kelly. George Tishy, good to see you, George. The Bible itself has some challenges. Adding 100,000 pages to it makes it a bitter salad. Well, a few of these we'll just bring up and as comments, Kelly. I just like to bring up things to let people know that their voice is valued like like cod liver oil, George. Oh dear. Stephen Beagles is watching. He's just said hola. And Stephen is helping me with a very simple SDAQ&A website. If people want to see it growing, it's literally just started. Very, very basic. Eventually it will have a little intro to who we are, links to all the episodes, and resources section. And I reckon it'd be great to have the verdict and plain truth scanned into there as well.
Well, I enjoy those.
Yeah, so I'm going to look into that.
You know, after my wife passed away, my daughter came up and helped me do the paperwork. And it's her husband now, his fiance at the time. He brought his guitar up.
Oh.
And he plays the guitar and stuff. And I was kind of inspired to do something, you know. But I had a guitar, but the steel strings just killed my fingers. So ukulele, baritone ukulele is what I'm playing right now. And I said, well, you toughen up those strings on the ukulele first before I get to this guitar. Guitar down, I cannot get that F chord at all.
Oh, I've got some tricks to teach you about that one if you like. Off air, if you hang around afterwards, I'll give you a quick trick. By the way, I'm about to release 8 or 10 guitar lessons for beginners online. I'll let everyone know. And I think 8 ukulele lessons and 4 djembe lessons. So that's coming out soon to try and bring in extra income so I can pour it all back into SDAQ&A. Actually, another quick vote from those watching. See my nice little window out here where I look out into my backyard. I'm thinking of taking that down and replacing it with a different guitar every week or something like that. Let me know in the comments if you think that's a good idea. Now, this is from Brian Tyler. He's giving us some information about the Awakening movement and how you might be able to get in touch with them now. I haven't checked this, so hopefully it's not just you're not throwing me a tangent, are you there, Brian? Hi, Brother Peter, just dropping in. I used to correspond heavily back with those from that movement via email and phone. One of the brothers even dedicated this site that contains all his teachings, documents, etc. So we might check that out. Awakeandsing.com. So thank you, Brian, for that. Well, we've got lots of comments here today. George again, Canwright, Kellogg, Ballinger, Brinsmead, Ford, Ray, Numbers, Daly, and many others contributed to help us understand what the SDAC really is. What's the C stand for there, George? Oh, I know, yeah. Colt. Now, Andy Mack. Is this Andy Mack that I know that was a youth pastor, did some gigs, Andy, for you back in the day? Or is this a different Andy Mack? Let me know in the comments if you're still watching. Andy has written, I've learned more about Adventism in the last 3 months moving out of the church than in the 50-odd years I've been in the church. Well, Andy, I hopefully we've been a good resource to help you learn lots about Adventism. Stephen Beagles has agreed with you there, Kelly. The devil works harder from the inside of the church. Stephen, maybe that's why my life is so easygoing ever since I left. The last 8 years have been very easy, flowing nicely, loving life. So there's a bit of advice, Stephen. Are you suggesting we all leave so we don't have to have the the terrible, what do you call that, oppression of the devil? The church has not been transparent and still refuses to be. So the truth and reality had to always come through independent channels. That's a good point. Maybe that's what inspired Bob. He realized there wasn't a lot of transparency coming through the main channels. What are your thoughts on that?
He was a ministerial student.
Mm.
I kind of looked at that and I says, the reason they disfellowshipped him is because they were telling him where he can preach and where he can't preach. I said, well, how stupid is that?
Yeah. Yeah.
We're called for the whole world. And being a ministerial student, I think that he felt impressed by the Holy Spirit to give a message. And
What are
I
your
think
What are your thoughts on if what I said before is true? And I don't want to speak on his behalf because we did two interviews. The first one was the awakening years. The second one was the verdict years, and then we touched on him becoming a counselor and leaving the Adventist Church altogether. And I said I get it, the feeling that you're heading towards kind of an almost agnostic kind of view. And he said, well, let's have a third interview and we'll discuss that. So,
oh,
well, if
that's
that's true, how does that make you feel? Because I don't think we should really look too much to the person, but to what they're saying. And if they're saying that at whatever time period they said it aligned with you, that doesn't make it a bad thing if they don't believe it anymore later.
yeah, I think that's true.
When you watched the interview I had with him, did you get the feeling that he had moved on not only from Adventism but from his faith in Christianity altogether?
He was basically explaining what was happening during that period of time, and I think he was very accurate in that.
Mm. So you must have watched the first one then, I think, of the two. Yeah. Okay, this is from Brian Tyler again, and I interviewed Brian a few weeks back. Great interview, Brian. We'll get you back again. Yes, the 60s was truly focused on a more historical SDA approach. During the early 70s, there was a shift into reformational theology and eventually an outright rejection of SDA doctrine. You can comment on that if you like, Kelly, or just...
Well, I don't know what he means by that last part.
Yeah, the rejection of it. I think
I think
I,
I agree.
I'm pretty
The
sure that from my interview with Brian, he's referring to this idea of the new theology is rejecting the traditional Adventism, and
I think what that means.
so I kind of look at the church in two defined eras. I see 1888 as the beginning of righteous by faith, salvation, assurance, Jesus first instead of works. That discussion. I see 1919 as Ellen White had just died. The church, there's meetings. You probably heard of the 1919 Bible Conference, and they're discussing these things. Look, she's about to be put on a pedestal. Do we tell her that maybe we know already that she borrowed some stuff and there's this and that? And that was hidden. And so during the 20s, 30s and 40s and some of the 50s, there was quite a lifting Ellen up on a pedestal. Come QOD, questions on doctrine, where Adventists are about to be put in a book on cults. They're whoa, hang on, we don't want that. As Matthew was talking about the other day, and we're going to continue next week. After questions on doctrine, I feel like that book created a more evangelical kind of Adventism. And the church grew, by 1984, from 1957, there was 1 million members to 4 million members. And a lot of it was because of this new theology that was coming through, brought in by the likes of Bob Brinsmead later, Ford, Cottrell, bunch of people were bringing it in. So Brian is kind of saying that the traditional Adventists are before, the new theology guys that came after, the Fords, the Brinsmeads, they're the bad guys. They're the ones that have rejected the original Adventist doctrine. That's a long summation there, but shorter than I could do.
I the word traditional slightly different, but anyway, that's the way he's defining it, the way he sees it.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
I got a little different.
How do you see it?
Well, I think that we've had this truth all along, and that we've had blinders on. It's like Jesus said: "You have ears, but you don't hear. You have eyes, but you don't see."
And I think he would agree with you on that. And I think he would say that the people who have the blinders are the new theology guys. And he would see them potentially as wolves in sheep's clothing. Whereas what I was talking about before is I can belong to a traditional Adventist church, a Doug Batchelor style, a Bob Brinsmead style that you're talking about, a Des Ford style, and I kind of see the good in all of those. Like I can go, oh, if this is your modality and you're focusing on some goodness and love, they all seem to be quite happy, but they seem to fight each other and they're threatened by each other. And maybe Brian, and we can ask this in our next interview, Brian, do you feel threatened by those with the new theology? Would you rather them out altogether? Ellen White talks about the shaking and predicts that people like me are going to be shaken out of the church. And so a lot of that they see is coming true, the predictions that she talked about.
Well, if you have something in your thinking that shakes you from your relationship with Jesus, that should be concerning, because you should love Jesus. And when you get to heaven, he should be a real close friend of yours. And I think that he says, I never knew you to some of them. And some of them did this and you did this and this for me.
I think, though, that some people are threatened by people leaving Adventism, even if, like people like Dale Ratzlaff left Adventism, but most certainly still followed God. But people criticized him like crazy.
Well, there it goes back to that one sentence. All those that wouldn't be comfortable there won't be there, and those that would enjoy it will be there.
And those judging the others have no right really to judge.
That's God's job.
Yeah, exactly.
He says, in his parable, he said, don't pull out the tares. That tare that they were talking about is in the grass family. You know what actually caused it to be so poisonous to the human system? It was a fungus growing on it. I think there's a spiritual lesson there.
Yeah. I like your allegories.
Think, hey, that was the only poisonous grass on the planet. And then I got thinking, well, I think Montesano did something. Took the DNA and messed it around, took it out from a bacteria and shoved it into the corn. Yeah. Anyway.
I'm bringing up another comment. This is from Angela. Hey, Angela. Lima is watching. Always love having you on the show, Angela, watching and putting your comments in. I think Ellen used those same words, agitate, agitate, agitate. That's when we were talking about that before, but don't irritate. And one of my pastors liked to quote that. And Angela, see if you can find that quote, because I can use that for me to see. Ellen White says that I can do SDAQ&A. And she mentions when we were talking about current politics, she says, worse, just listen to Ted Wilson's last sermon. Yeah, it was quite mind-blowing.
Oh, I didn't hear it.
Yeah, look, I think you're happy. I think avoid all the politics. Select the SDAQ&A ones that you think you'll like. Go and watch Steve Beagle's interview I did with him. I'd be very interested to know if you and he are on the same page. He has just written here. He and I get on well, but we probably don't agree on a lot of stuff, and some stuff we do. The old men are dying off. The younger generation needs to take the wheel. Yeah, the problem is they are taking the wheel, and they're taking it down the same path as Ted Wilson.
Peter, none of us are going to agree on everything.
No. How boring would that be? My mic went there. I was saying before we went off air, before we went on air, you and I were laughing our heads off, and I'm sure we disagree about a lot of things. But hey, you don't have to believe anything to enjoy a laugh. I'm not sure what Stephen means with this. He said the end, 1844 marks the end of the end times. The end of the 2,300 days means we are in the 11th hour. And
so does he think that God's got a clock and he's going to push this?
I think I don't know. He's going to go somewhere with this in a minute. I'm not sure. I'll find it. Kevin Wagner, who I interviewed the other day, is Ford going to be saved? Thank you, Carl. He concurs. It was a stupid question. Boy, we are having lots of comments, so I'm obviously not keeping up. But we'll wrap it up soon, Kelly. I've really enjoyed our conversation today. So just be thinking as I bring up some of these, some final words you'd like to say about the positivity that you took away. The timing of it sounds like it was amazing, and that you still have warm feelings about with the awakening movement. George has written, the book of Hebrews is the key. Nothing happened in heaven in 1844. Thank you, George. I love this person's name on YouTube, Herb Addict. I know Herb Addict. I know who you are. Most opposing the prophetic periods cannot give any clear alternative application to the text they oppose. Now, you raised this in your interview with me, Brian. I can mention that. We mentioned it on our interview that you're Herb Addict, so there's no secrets there. But why do you have to have an alternative? I guess is something I thought of after. Just because something is wrong, let's say George is right here, and George says if you read Hebrews, the key thing is nothing happened in heaven in 1844. Why don't you just go, cool, nothing happened? Why find an alternative? My thought is that everything that you need to find if you're a Christian is in the Gospels, in the Bible anyway. Why the Adventist kind of extra add-on to the house that seems to be put on rather like it wasn't put on by builders? Okay, we've got, thank you, Dale. Still have not got that CD. Okay, Dale, can you hang around after this interview and can we Zoom each other? And I'm going to come up with a solution. I've got no idea why that's not happened. Dale ordered a CD from me ages ago, and for some reason, it's just.
But one of your guitar playing things?
What was that? What?
Was it one?
It's a very mellow acoustic guitar and singing album, and
really good.
It's a gospel album recorded about 20 years ago, and
Wow.
I'd say I'll send you a copy, but we might have the same problems as Dale. He's from California, and I've sent 2 or 3 copies, and they still have disappeared every time. But anyway, I'll talk to Dale about that some more. We'll work that out. Who said this? Oh dear. Jesse David Tasker has said that the F chord is horrible. It is a horrible chord. It was the first difficult chord I personally came across. And my advice is don't worry about the strings vibrating or muting. Just play it anyway. Just play. Don't try and get it just right. There might be a metaphor we can find in here, but don't try and get the F chord just right. Just play it. Let it buzz. Let it mute. Just play it and forget about it. The key is to keep playing the beat. Don't stop to get the chord. This is a mystery lesson, free one. I used to charge a lot for this tip. You play, you say you're going from a C, 1, 2, 3, 4 to the F. Keep playing even if you haven't got the chord yet. Just keep playing.
But what about just playing 5 bottom strings?
Don't worry about it. Don't worry if it's out of tune, buzzing, muted. The key is to keep the time going, whether you've got the chord or not. And eventually, one day you'll go, oh, I'm playing it.
Oh, okay.
Guitar lessons on SDAQ&A. Oh my goodness. Now, who has said this? Oh boy, we're getting some very interesting. Why did you guys start writing very interesting questions right to the end here? Because we're going to have to go. I don't know who said this. If the church allows gay ministers, I will light my SDA baptismal vow on fire. We're going to rapid fire some of these, Kelly. I don't understand why people would leave the church and keep their names on the books, like hanging onto a doctrine just in case you want to switch back. Good point. That's why I not only left the church, I took my name off the books. And those watching, if you've left the church, I highly recommend you do that, because otherwise your numbers are being used as statistics to prop up the church's membership population. Carl Wagner, interviewed Carl the other day. It's a good one. I'd be interested to see your thoughts, actually, Kelly, on that interview. Go and watch Carl's interview. It's last week, I think.
Okay.
I think you both might have a lot in common, perhaps. The Jews had 2 calendars, one religious and the other civil. The civil started on the 7th month. and the religious on the first month. Okay, well, not sure there.
What does he mean by the first month?
Yeah, I think that's a whole other conversation going on there. We unless Carl wants to maybe say something else there. Zero
I could
chance.
give out there.
Say that again
I could give a little challenge.
on this one. On the
Yeah.
Jews had two calendars, one religious and the other civil. The civil started on the 7th, the religious on the 1st. Yeah, Carl's a traditional Adventist, so I'd be interested in your challenge. Away you go.
Well, at one time I thought Ellen White had made a mistake. It had to do with the flood and the dates on the flood. So I took Usher and I took the date of the flood. Of course, Usher used the civil time and not the one that occurs in the springtime, and backtracked. And I backtracked it, and you could see exactly what day of the week everything was happening.
So what day of the week did Christ get crucified?
Well, I don't know that one. I'm talking about Noah's flood.
Right, but I'm saying if you can work that out with the same method, can you work out when Christ died?
I'm not sure about that.
That's a little challenge for you.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe I should try that one.
Yeah, try that one and get back to me.
Anyway, she talks about that when all the animals come, they spend a week preparing that. So it was like the animals started coming to the ark on the Sabbath. And they went into the ark, they stayed in there for a whole week till the Sabbath. And then after the Sabbath was over, the rain started pouring down. Anyway, just a little tidbit that I
That's
did.
interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, you could do a whole interview on just that topic. Here's Moto Sapien. There's some of that victuperation that Gillian mentioned when she was on last. That's true, and I've forgotten what that even means. Jesse David Tasker, hey there. No sandals, only the whip was used. Well, where did I get that urban myth from then?
Yeah, but you could use that as a title to the song. I mean, there was a song out, Sandals, Sandals.
Whip and sandals. I might get into trouble for that one.
Yeah, you could use the sandals for the same thing that was going on with Sandals. Sandals, he's walking with the sandals, and then the whip, right?
I don't know if we should go down that path. Now,
No,
Carl Wagner said, it's okay, I couldn't care less who the actress was. The movie was well made. Tell the world, which had a lot of historical mistakes. That's true. Great movie, really. Like, I was super impressed, incredibly impressed. I'm watching it there thinking, boy, I know the guy who made this, and what a great job he's done. And it'd be good to have him on the show one day and talk about it. And while I was watching it, we were at a kind of a retreat, and it was up on the big screen, and everyone was just watching it like this. And there's the scene, and Carl will know, we chatted about this the other day. There's a scene where Ellen's holding up the big heavy book, holding it up, and she's pointing at it, and someone's got a little ladder and looking down and going, "Oh yeah, she's got the right thing." And the guy leans over to me next to me and goes, "See, it did happen." And I said, mate, it's just a movie. we're not watching it in real time right now. Oh, I love it. Okay, Brian, Peter, try sitting down with the opponents of these teachings without any pre-discussion, and you have them explain Daniel 8:14, Daniel 12:1, etc., or question them heavily on their position. I agree. I think it would be incredibly difficult conversations, but I'm saying that once both sides seem to think that if their side is right or incorrect, well, what then? And yours is wrong. I just feel like,
yeah.
if it's wrong, why does there have to be an opposer? Like if you
Isn't that
don't like
like,
Donald Trump, does that mean you do like Biden? Like you don't have to have an opposing. Oh, I can't remember what it's called. Cyclic fallacy. I don't know.
Oh, I tell you what, if you like Donald Trump, you sure do not like Biden.
We're we're not going into politics. You're not to watch Ted Wilson or any American politics. You've got to stay in your happy place. M. Stubbins, I'm just random here. WWC 1970, we were just told Brinsmead was an offshoot and to stay away from him. Interesting. Yeah, and you were told that too.
Yeah.
Carl Wagner, okay to mention my name. Oh no, I was referring to Brian with his Herb Addict site before. If I didn't want to be associated with anything of the movie, I'd keep my mouth shut. Yeah, we're getting more comments about the guitar lessons. Oh, good. Who said they're going to get the guitar lessons? Good on you, Stephen Beagles. Hey, we'll post them on the SDA. It's called SDAQ&A.wordpress.com. Go and check it out. Boy, we're going to have to leave some of these soon. They're just fascinating, and it's we'll just bring this one up. Brian, I think, has said he must be writing from YouTube and Facebook. I like it. At the core of what the SDA Church was founded upon and the unique message given to it, the 70s was certainly a change in that foundation. I see what you're saying there, Brian. Well said. I agree with you. And I agree with those of you, Brian, who are trying to get your church back. I believe those that have changed the foundation have built a new foundation. It's like the new theology just it's chalk and cheese to the traditional Adventism. There's a legacy and a connection, of course. Froome spearheaded questions on doctrine. We can ask Matthew about that next week. Don't forget HMS Richards and the Voice of Prophecy. Sure. I left before they shook me out. Who said that? Oh, Angela. I left before they shook me out. Yeah, that's interesting. Dale. I feel bad every time I see Dale's name come up. I think, oh, those CDs. Dale, I'm going to give you 5 CDs, and that way you can give some to your friends to make up for the massive delay. I think God has a sense of humor. I believe the people we dislike will be our next door neighbors in heaven. I like it. You'd agree with that probably, would you, Kelly? Okay, we're going to run through these. A lot of these will be up there, of course, on our site, on Facebook. Description links in the description below, and of course on YouTube as well. Any last thoughts there, Kelly? It's been great chatting with you. Hope you've enjoyed yourself. Yeah, that's right. You and I were getting lost in the conversation of the comments. Conversations in the comments.
You want me to?
I just want you to kind of share in closing what you've already shared, but just to tie it together about the special connection you had with Bob Brinsmead and the Awakening.
Well, it goes back to the time when I was in high school, junior, at Samba Squaw. I was conflicted on. I heard that Jesus died for me, but the judgment's coming, and I'm having people say, "Are you ready?" And it caused me to look internally. I could find no peace there. And the Awakening gave me an answer to that.
Yeah. And kind of, what's the word, serendipitously running into Bob Brinsmead and his meetings and that movement reinforced that sense of...
Maybe you could do me a favor. You talked about taking Matthew to see Bob Brinsmead.
Yes.
Ask about the rock and through the windshield.
Okay, we will. I've told Matthew and Adrian and anyone who wants to join us for a road trip, we're going to go and spend a weekend with Bob Brinsmead. He doesn't know that. He doesn't know that yet.
If you have a chance to talk with John Brinsmead, ask him about the sermon in Sacramento, the capital of California, when they were in the States Hotel, and he gave a sermon about the guy who came up at the end of the sermon and gave a testimony, not being an Adventist, not being a Christian, just somebody off the road, hearing for his first time about salvation.
Yeah.
Ask John
I'll
about.
ask him about that. Yeah, because John's still going, isn't he? He's the younger brother. Is that right? Can't
I
remember.
think he's.
Well, Gillian Ford knows both of them. So, Gillian, maybe you can organise an interview with John and myself, and we'll ask him on the program.
Do a fact check and get back with me. Maybe,
I will.
it's been a long time ago. Sometimes I forget what. I go to the bathroom in the morning and sometimes say, who is that guy? As you get older, you forget things. But it might jog their memory, and you could do a fact check on that.
I will definitely do that. In fact, I'm going to write to Bob Brinsmead. I've got his mobile number, cell phone. I'm going to write to him right now and say, can we do an interview soon? Well, we'll leave it there. It's been great talking to you, Kelly. And
Well, thanks for having me on, and I enjoy your music at the very beginning.
Thank you.
Keep doing that.
That live one is not actually out yet, but it's going to come out as a live album. I've got a few live songs like that one at the beginning. And then the real mellow one. Do you have Spotify?
No.
Apple Music?
A very sheltered life.
I'm going to have to send you a CD. I'll send you and Dale one. Are you far? You're in California, aren't you?
Do you have my address? I can give it to you after we
message me your address. And you don't need to wait now because I've already given you the guitar lesson.
What?
Remember I said wait after the interview and I'll give you that guitar lesson with the F chord. And now you don't need to wait around afterwards because I've already given it to you. But message me your address and I'll send you a CD. Okay, mate. Until we meet again, catch you later. See you, everyone. Don't forget, next week we've got EJ Thunder and we've got Matthew, Lucio. And the following week, we've got 2 interviews with Arthur Klim. We're going to look at Fred Veltman's study on borrowing, the 8-year study. It's going to be fantastic. See you guys.